There are many things that can be said about articles in English. Today we're going to be talking about just a few of those things. In general, we're going to address the question, when should we use the? Most of the answer has to do with uniqueness, of which there are several kinds. One kind has to do with shared knowledge. For example, the sun, the stars, the planets, the atmosphere. We all know that there is only one sun, that when we say the stars, we're not talking about some random stars, we mean all of the stars. When we say the planets, we always mean the planets that are in orbit around our sun. The rich, the poor, the living, the dead, all of these phrases are unique because the rich is always used to mean all of the rich. The same with all of the poor, all of the living, all of the dead, even all of the old and all of the young. The past and the future are a little bit different because there is only one past and there is only one future. So they are entirely unique. Let's look at some examples. A hole was recently discovered in the ozone layer. We call it the ozone layer because there is only one. The seas are slowly rising. We call them the seas because we mean them collectively, all the seas. Laws exist to protect the weak from the strong. Similarly, the phrase the weak means all of the weak. The phrase the strong means all of the strong. Another category of uniqueness is created by superlatives and ordinals. Ordinals meaning ordinal numbers, the first, the second, and so on. Let's look at some examples. Words like the best, the most, the oldest are superlatives. The worst, the least, the youngest, the first, the second, the last include our ordinals, the first and the second, obviously, and will include the last. I suppose you could call that a superlative if you wanted, rather than an ordinal, but they function really the same way. There is only one first, there is only one last. So, the smartest student is not always the happiest. We've got two superlatives here. The smartest, there is only one smartest. Likewise, there is only one happiest, so we say the happiest. A chain is no stronger than the weakest link. There is only one weakest link, so we call it the weakest link. Notice at the beginning of the sentence we say a chain because we are talking about any chain. The third patient was kept in isolation. There is only one third patient, so we refer to that patient as the third. Notice, of course, that superlatives and ordinals always occur in a context. We don't mean the third patient out of all the infinite patients that have ever existed. We mean the third patient on a particular day or out of a particular group of patients that we will have already specified. Oh, speaking of specifiers, they also create a certain kind of uniqueness. So we have words like the same, the sole, the only, the chief, the principal, and so on. Let's look at how some of these function in real sentences. Simbat was the only student who passed the test. So this kind of works by definition. When we say the only student, that automatically makes that student unique. Again, we're discussing this student in a particular context. We don't mean the only student in the history of the universe. We mean a particular student who passed a particular test, probably on a particular day, quite likely in a particular class. The usual course of action led us to a boring solution. We say the usual course of action because we mean the one that we take all the time, every day, or perhaps whenever a certain set of circumstances comes up. Contrast that with a boring solution. I imagine that there are many possible boring solutions. The original film is better than its sequels. Kind of like the word only, the original is by definition unique. There is only one original film. Let's turn now to a second condition that allows us to use the word the. Again, it indicates a particular kind of uniqueness, but now we're talking about uniqueness definitely in a particular context. By second reference, we mean that it is the second time that we have referred to a thing or an idea within a particular passage of text. This can happen in several ways. The first happens when we repeat specific words. So, the nurse took a blood sample. Unfortunately, the vial was contaminated and the sample coagulated almost immediately. So here is the first reference. Notice the word a. It's a blood sample. And here is the second reference. It is now the sample. In the first reference, we identified the one that we are speaking about. We know that the second reference refers to a specific sample, the one that we mentioned previously. This can happen in adjacent sentences, as we see here, but it can also happen when that first reference is 3 or 4 or 5 sentences back, and in many cases it might be several paragraphs back. Another example, the security guard required the instructor to wear a face mask before entering the store. Years later, the instructor would claim that the mask had saved his life. So here's our first reference. It is a face mask. The second reference to the same mask is now the mask, because the mask has been identified already. Another category of second reference is very similar to the first, but we are no longer requiring that the words themselves be repeated. This has more to do with the idea represented by the words being repeated. So an example, Ali Bek and Sarjan did not like each other. The two roommates had nothing in common. So here's our first reference, Ali Bek and Sarjan. And in the second sentence, we do not repeat those two names. Instead, we refer to them in a somewhat different way, the two roommates. Maybe we knew previously that they were roommates. Maybe this is the first time that we're finding out about it. In any case, the phrase the two roommates refers to Ali Bek and Sarjan. Another example, Saltanat bought a new smartphone. She broke the device a week later. Here's our first reference. a new smartphone. Here's the second reference, the device. So we've already mentioned the smartphone. Now we're using the word the because the smartphone has been referred to, but we're paraphrasing the concept smartphone into the phrase the device. Another kind of uniqueness that allows us to use the word the occurs by implication. Let's start with a concept, restaurant. A restaurant always has a kitchen. If there is no place to prepare food, then it's not really a restaurant. So let's look at a sentence. We went to a restaurant last week. Our table was near the kitchen. So in the first sentence, we're referring to a restaurant that presumably we have never discussed before. In the second sentence, we are now permitted to refer to the kitchen. We have never referred to this particular kitchen before. However, the fact that we are in a restaurant that has been specified implies that there is also a kitchen. It's a kitchen unique to this restaurant, so we are now able to say the kitchen. Another example, the word corpse, which of course means a dead body, implies that there is a heart. When a pathologist examines a corpse, she will eventually weigh the heart. We're talking in this case in a very general way about any hypothetical corpse, and that's our first reference. In our second reference, we are permitted to say the heart because every corpse implies a specific heart. This is the heart that is contained by the corpse that is mentioned in the first reference. Let's look at some additional examples. The instructors took a taxi to the university. I want you to notice how many different ideas are implied by this first reference to a taxi. They listened to the radio because a taxi implies a radio. So it is now the radio that has been specified by the existence of the taxi referred to in the first sentence. The engine was loud. If there is a taxi, there must be an engine. It's implied by the taxi. Therefore, it is the engine that matches the taxi. Likewise, the brakes did not function correctly. The existence of a taxi implies a matching set of brakes. So we are now permitted to say the brakes. We'll look at a similar example. Donna Gould enrolled in Say What You Mean. The instructor was an American. This course, Say What You Mean, implies that there must be an instructor. A course also implies a classroom. The classroom was in block 6. The existence of a course also implies students. Most of the students had taken rhetoric and composition. We're going to talk about the word of, and we're going to look at two very different uses of the word of. Partitive means what you think it might mean if you notice the first section of the word. It is part of something larger. While I was at Rom's store yesterday, I bought a liter of milk. There's the phrase that we are concerned with. Let's look at it by itself. A liter of milk. I want you to imagine all the milk in the universe. How many possible liters of milk are there? We are now identifying just a part of all of those many, many, many liters. A liter of all that milk. So if we're going to talk about a partitive rule, we're staring at it right now. When we're looking at something that could be thought of as a large collection of things, and we only want to discuss one item of that collection, then we use the word a. Similar example, while I was at Rom's store on the first day of the quarantine, all that remained in the dairy section were a liter of milk, a liter of kefir, and 180 grams of sour cream. There's our liter of milk again. And now I want you to see what happens with the second reference. I bought the liter of milk. As before, with the second reference, we have specified which liter of milk we are talking about. And so we are permitted to say, I bought the liter of milk. This particular rule, the partitive of rule, really only applies to the first reference. For references after that, we use the second reference rule. All of these words indicate that we're looking at a partitive concept. All of them can be followed by the word of, and when that happens, they use the same rule that we have just identified. Here's an example. We examined a thin section of tissue. So we're looking at the word section. It's followed by of, and then a noun phrase that tells us what it's a section of, and we see the word a thin section of tissue. Similarly, the geologist held a large grain of biotite. The nutrition opened a wheel of cheese. The biologist discovered a new species of rat. The children lost an important piece of the puzzle. All of these sentences contain a partitive of, and every one of the words indicating the part, the section, the grain, the wheel, the species, the piece, is introduced by the word a, or in the last case, the word an. Let's contrast that with the proprietary of. The word proprietary implies a property of something else. The speed of sound depends on many factors. We are looking at the phrase that contains the word of, the speed of sound. Notice now, it's different from the partitive of, because we are talking about the speed of sound. We are not now imagining that there are many sounds and we're concerned with only one of them. Instead, we're concerned with a unique property of sound. Sound has only one speed in any particular context. So we refer to it as the speed. I'm going to take you through several similar examples to contrast the partitive of with the proprietary of. In the first, a frequency of light. There are many possible frequencies of light. In this particular case, we would be discussing only one frequency, so we need to use the word a. Contrast that with the speed of light. In any particular context, light has only one speed. That is why we are allowed to call it the speed of light. It is a unique property. A molecule of sodium chloride. Again, this is our partitive of. You can imagine a large block of sodium chloride, and it contains many, many, many molecules. In this particular phrase, we are concerned with just one molecule. It's not unique. It's like the molecule of sodium chloride sitting right next to it. Contrast that with the melting point of sodium chloride. This is a unique property. Similarly, a genus of dinosaurs. We know from the fossil record that dinosaurs doesn't even name one particular genus. It names many genera, and in this particular phrase, we're identifying just one of them. Contrast that with the evolution of dinosaurs. There is only one evolution under discussion in this phrase, so we are permitted to use the word the. A copy of Windows 10. Consider how many notebooks, how many desktop computers are there in the universe. So the first time we refer to a copy of Windows 10, we don't know which one it is. So it's a copy. Contrast that with the price of Windows 10. The consistent thread that runs through all of these cases is the sense of uniqueness. There are many reasons that a thing or an idea might be unique, but in every case, it is the uniqueness that gives us permission to introduce that thing or idea with the word the.